Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name's Tyler. As I prep for another Ukraine video, because there's a whole bunch of shiznits that has gone on that I need to talk about, and again, why the Ukrainians are undermining their own stuff, and it's kind of getting really scary if you look at what the Ukrainians have been doing to Hungary. That is absolutely an act of war, going after the Hungarian energy pipeline from Russia. Just they can't help themselves from attacking civilian infrastructure. It's ridiculous. Not that the Russians don't do the same thing. It's just more controlled and methodical, and they're actually doing it to the country they're at war with, not their neighbor, trying to get them pulled into the war and blame it on the Russians. But that's besides the point. This video is all about the largest and most fatal flaw the current iteration of the right has. And that's narrative control and understanding that if you want to get something done, you have to create a story about it, about why it's important. This is a concept that is basically as old as humanity, if not, older. We don't exactly know too much about, Neanderthals and before, but let's just say it's likely a trait through all humanoids, as far as we can tell. Now, there's obviously a distinction between greater and lesser apes. They don't seem to have the same storytelling ability. But if you, again, back to my point of this, if you look throughout history, the way humanity most effectively communicated information, it was through stories. It was a narrative device to impart knowledge that gave greater impact than saying, hey, do this. Hey, I need you to be careful in the forest because it's a dangerous place. Instead, what they did is they created children's tales to, again, you give a narrative to suck people in, and you give real consequences in that story, or in multiple stories. Like, if you look through the Brothers Grimm original tales, how many of the stories are, hey, like the big takeaway is be wary of the forest because it is a inherently dangerous place. You have wolves, you have uneven terrain, you can get lost, yada yada yada. You can eat poisonous mushrooms, and it's again, dangerous place. Not so much nowadays for most people where you live close to the city. The forests that are near you are most likely fairly domesticated in comparison. There's some outlying areas where it is still relatively dangerous close to the city. Like, I can think of every once in a while there's a problem in LA with the hiking trails with is it cougars or mountain lions? I think it's mountain lions. They got up there, and they will totally snatch stupid people who try to take a picture with the big kitty. The big kitty has nice claws and teeth that are, can be half the size of a finger. Like, that's gonna do some damage. But even if you look at the shift of narrative storytelling of, just tales to the tale of history itself, or historical events, it is always shaped even in the modern era, there is a the way the good historians write about history, it is still a narrative because we don't know for sure. And you can say, there's a very good period of time where history was like very dry, and they were trying to do it as clinical as possible, and you know the academics cared. But if you want people to learn history, you have to draw them in with the story because it's what we are used to. Nowadays, most of it's, offloaded into, say, Hollywood, or to a lesser extent, I would say, YouTube. There are channels that do that. Uh, There's also literature still. It's not as big as it once was, but you still have these narrative devices that are there to communicate ideas, and they're actually much more effective. Um, Specifically, if you look at in literature, if you look at modern sci-fi, and I would say modern-ish, I would say like 1980s sci-fi to say early 2000s, there is a wealth of good literature that gives you the warnings of what were to come. You also have fantastic writers like, say, Ayn Rand, even though um, Rand lives off in this uh, polar opposite communist utopia where completely free markets is a great idea, and anarcho capitalism could be a viable thing. It's not. You've got the likes of George Orwell warning all over about communism and stuff. It's not, and let me go back to Ayn Rand. It's not that Ayn Rand doesn't make good points in those movies about, or in those books about, you know, the ideas of, say, like crony capitalism and the merger of state and government and subsidies, and you need to have a competitive market, blah 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 blah. Like there are really good ideas in there about the state corrupting people, and you should absolutely take that away. But like the ideal that's written in the books is an anarcho-capitalist society, which you can see in the book only exists in a small freaking hollowed out mountain with a very curated amount of people. It's the polar opposite of communism. It only can work on this extremely curated um small scale. I bring all this up to point out that the right has not yet managed to learn from the left's 40 years, give or take, of dominance. There is a reason why the leftists went after Hollywood. They went after media, all forms of media, not and why specifically when they went after Hollywood, they went after script writers and used script writers as shadow speech writers, and like there are Hollywood writers who write the scripts for like campaign season and framing of narratives because they understand it. I believe there's also authors that do it as well. Like there's a reason why the NED, National Endowment for Democracy, to push their regime change, buys up, um, uh, how would I put them? Like very relatively popular, at least popular with the younger crowd, because the NAD is all about regime change amongst students. That is basically their objective. So there's a reason why they buy up. I want to say local papers, but that's so old. It's like online media channels that their target audience is that student activist type of demographic. And it's because you can shape this narrative and drive these people to do basically whatever you want. We saw this with COVID. If you are Canadian, you should be adeptly familiar with narrative manipulation and narrative control because they were fairly decent at it. Like, it was obvious to see, but the way and how effective it was very well done. Like, they created a, moral panic about a novel. I don't want to minimize the disease, but it's more than a flu, but like way less than what they claimed. It is, again, it's a novel virus that was out there that we still don't fully understand the virus itself and what parts are in there. Like, it's really interesting when you listen to doctors who have actually been looking as closely as possible at that thing and being like, hey, this is this chain from this patent by, I think, Moderna is one of their patented, it's not a molecular chain, but it's the closest word I can remember. It's like a molecular chain that they patented for viruses to like inject payloads into people. If I'm remembering correctly, it's something like that. You can also find like bits and pieces of like HIV/AIDS in there. It's really fucking weird, sliced and hacked together virus. Obviously, from all the information that I found, like, that thing was totally hacked together by humans, and we still have no fucking clue what that thing could possibly do damage-wise in the body long term, or short term for that matter. Because in the short term, we injected other things into people's bodies that could possibly cover up what damage the virus did. You can see, it's less difficult than you would think, but more difficult than whatever. But you also have the problem of the medicine for the supposed virus being extremely risky and very not bueno. So there's that. Anyways, my point is, like, 40 years of narrative warfare by the left. You would think that someone on the right would understand that you need to sell a story. All right? It doesn't have to be manipulative, but if you want something done, you have to tell a story why it's important, because that's more impactful than me saying, yes, we must reduce the deficit because we need to be fiscally responsible. Like, if you're saying that, like, nobody gives a flying F at all. It's why conservatives have failed at that. And, another thing that's going horribly, a little bit horribly, it's somewhat working in their favor. The redistricting in parts of the United States, redrawing congressional lines, and so on and so forth. The left gerrymandered the ever-living hell out of these districts. And I mean that. Like, it is 100% what they did was illegal under U.S. constitutional law. Because they were drawing districts, all right, to disenfranchise, say, black populist voters, which there are a lot, and hem them in with the radical black leftists, so that the black populists lost agency on their votes because they weren't voting with other populists in America. They were and then instead thrown in with insane leftists who also happen to be black, and that's why the district was drawn, was based on we need the blacks to vote together. Like, it is insanely racist and completely against constitutional law, because the only reason it was drawn was based on race. Like, there was no other justification. But they got away with it because there's a U.S. law after the Civil Rights Act that said they needed to redistrict so that, oh god, I can't remember the reason, but like there is a law that allowed them to do it, even though it fails constitutional law, which is superior law. But what that gets at is now that when the Republicans are in and they are undoing the gerrymandering, I think Texas didn't go as far as they could have, or maybe they did go far. I'm not the best at what the specifics there of how much the Republicans gerrymandered, when they redrew the lines like a couple weeks ago. But they lost the narrative war. Trump, is losing the narrative war with getting shares of Intel. He's losing the narrative war of, hey, I could do this more. I think it's a dumb thing to do, and I put it out there. But if you wanted to do it, again, you say, okay, we are doing this so that American companies have a vested interest in America. We have a vested interest in this. This is for national security. You could sell it that way. All right? You'd have to be very careful when using the words national security because of what happened in the wake of 2001. But there is a narrative there that you could sell if you thought it was the right thing to do. I don't think it is the right thing to do, but there's that. You can also see Trump losing the narrative war with Ukraine, Russia. He is being sucked in by the Europeans and set up to be the reason why Ukraine fell, or the reason why the war expanded. Again, I said earlier that there's a lot to talk about with Ukraine. Some of that is going to be in that video. If you look here in Canada, all right, the right is now, once again, because of Pierre, going on about the carbon tax. Carbon tax 2.0. Axe the tax. It's back, baby. A narrative that lost him the election because he couldn't sell it. Now, there's probably Conservative Party supporters out there defending this, saying, hey, look, this is going to be the tactic. He's going to use axe the tax now and save the real stuff for when he's, when there's an election, because we're just buying our time until we can get some form of an election. It's like, that's what he did last time, and he lost because he got politically outmaneuvered in the narrative warfare with Trump. Do you expect him to win at that again when he has shown that he is an abject failure at it? His team is terrible. Carney may be one of the worst candidates for prime minister that Canada has ever had, but his team knows what the ever-living F they are doing. They are, I'm assuming, because Canada is becoming the battleground for the globalists with Donald Trump, using us as a sacrificial pawn, which is absolute BS. But besides that, he's probably got, there's probably a lot of grift going around with this, but he's got the backup of the globalists. He's probably got some of the Tierist 1 script writers to handle Donald Trump. Now, the fact it's not working terribly well in Canada, is left to be seen, because or not left to be seen. It's not working very well, and most of that is the guy selling it is Mark Carney, and has like as much negative charisma as Pierre does. Like, they're just terrible candidates. But if you look at other parties in Canada, they're not offering up a story. The PPC is running on "fuck you, I was right." The only people that appeals to are the people who say "fuck you, I was right." You can't win on that. You need a narrative which to sell people so that they buy in and they show up to vote. The right is terrible at this, and they need to learn quickly. Otherwise, one of the best chances to really start rolling back the globalist is going to not disappear completely, but we've got a really decent chance here with Donald Trump and potentially J.D. Vance being the next president of the United States to really do damage and set up a foundation for a counterattack before things get real ugly. And I do mean ugly. It can get very ugly if nothing happens. You're very much boiling to that French Revolution point globally in the West. So I will leave you with that on why narrative control is very important. It is to prevent catastrophe and to unite groups together. It's very good at that. Anyways, until Monday, when I have finished collecting information and writing the narrative, and by writing I mean creating it in my head, because I'm not going to write it down. That's just not who I am. Of what I want to say about Ukraine and the ongoing negotiations and why I think, again, it is still likely to break down. That will be Monday. Until then, have a great weekend. It is not looking great for me. It is a very southern Ontario autumn. It is somewhat wet, threatening to rain even more, and it is also very, very dark and stormy. I mean, it's like almost September, so like I should expect it, but I liked the sun. It was nice. Anyways, till Monday, have a great week.